Hello, Whelan here, and welcome to my 1000 subscribers Q&A. First of all, huge thanks to all of my subscribers, and also a big thanks to everyone who asked me questions. Okay, so first question is from Jess MC, or Jessie MC. What was your inspiration to start YouTube? Now, what you might not know is that this channel originally started as a gaming channel, as I used to add pre-recorded reviews to a gaming podcast, Game Wank About Games. I went back over my reviews and just kind of threw together a slideshow on Windows Movie Maker so that I could upload them to YouTube. I found I really enjoyed the editing process when I did that, and I created a few original reviews on the channel as well. Of course, back then if I got 100 views and 5 likes, I thought that had done incredibly well. Then I started branching out into other content, and I just made videos about whatever I was interested in at the time. There was one in particular which didn't take off immediately, then started to gain traction, and that was the Babadook video, which made me think about writing more video essays in horror. So I kept doing that. Most recently I thought I'd do something about Inside Number 9, my favourite show at the minute, absolutely obsessed with it. And it turns out other people were obsessed with it too. Mars Claus asks, what are your favourite horror movies? Now, 2 of them you might be able to guess already, as they already have videos in the channel, and the other 3 I'm hoping to have videos on eventually. Don't ask me when, I've got no idea. But the first 2 would be The Exorcist, probably my favourite horror of all time, and The Babadook, which is my favourite horror movie of recent times. So the other 3 I'd like to mention here, first of all, Hereditary, which I remember there was an awful lot of hype for, and I went in to see it completely blind. I didn't read a review, I didn't want to know anything about it, and it just disturbed and shocked me in so many ways. Another one would be Rosemary's Baby, which was adapted from the novel by Ira Levin, who also wrote The Stepford Wives. And the 2 of these are books that have genuinely given me the fear. Now, while there hasn't really been a film adaptation of The Stepford Wives, which has really done it justice, I think they really nailed it with Rosemary's Baby. You've just got that creeping sense of paranoia, the idea that everyone around you might be about to betray you or you might be going insane. Last one, another classic, would be The Shining. I love Stephen King, I love Stanley Kubrick, so it's one of my favourite horror films. I think when I go to talk about that, I might be doing that in tandem, possibly with Dr. Sleep. For those of you who don't know, the film version of The Shining and the book version have some very different plot points, and yet Dr. Sleep manages to marry those up incredibly well. DJ Dozy asks, how did you first get introduced to horror? And you're probably going to laugh at this, but the first horror, or the first scary film I remember being allowed to watch was Gremlins, which I absolutely loved. And yet, looking back on it now, there are some bits that really are quite violent and quite scary for an 8-year-old. A couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to get to a screening of Gremlins around Christmas. I usually watch it around Christmas. I count it as a Christmas film. And the screening had a Q&A with Zach Galligan, who played Billy Peltzer. He had Gizmo with him as well. And he explained that when they made the first film, they hadn't really expressed the tone of the film. So all the horror scenes, all the scenes where he's being attacked by Stripe, he plays that absolutely straight. And you can see it, he really acts terrified by this thing. And yeah, if it's coming at you with a chainsaw, you're going to be scared. Furtive Pygmy asks, I'd like to know your favourite characters from League and Psychoville and top 5 psychological horror films. A few people have asked me about my favourite League of Gentlemen characters, and this came up recently when I joined a Facebook fan group. They asked me what my favourite character was, and I answered with the first character that came into my head, which, the more I think about it, might actually be my favourite character from the League, and the answer I gave was Tubbs Tat Syrup. And I think there's really something about her, and what it is while she's very unsettling and has killed a lot of innocent people, there's still this bizarre, almost endearing quality to her, and she always seems to get my sympathy, despite what she's done, despite the fact it's just Steve in a dress. And I remember this quite well from watching the League of Gentlemen anniversary specials with my sister, Jen. Hi Jen, if you're listening. And by the end of the specials, we'd had quite a bit to drink. And we weren't happy with the way Tubbs' story was left and started the unsuccessful hashtag #FreeTubbs in response. Favourite character from Psychoville? Mr. Jelly. Definitely Mr. Jelly. Just the perfect mix of horror, comedy and general weirdness. Also, Angry Reese is the best Reese. And the other question, top 5 psychological horror films. That's an interesting one because psychological horror means something different to different people. For some, they'd say it's a horror in which everything might have happened in one of the characters' heads, or one that works from the building sense of dread and fear as opposed to gore or jump scares. In which case, my top 5 psychological horrors would be the ones I mentioned under favourite horror movies. But some might consider psychological horror to be a horror or horror-themed film where there are no supernatural elements. And if that's the case, I would answer a few others. So starting with Silence of the Lambs, great film, the one that popularised the character Hannibal Lecter. Not the first film he appeared in. Another one is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which I remember the first time I saw it was on VHS, and it was rated an 18 certificate for, I believe it was prolonged psychological terror. Now, there's not any great deal of violence or gore or anything scary like that in it. I think they just didn't quite know what to do with it then. Another one would be Misery, which is what happens when Stephen King tries to show us what a writer might be afraid of. And he's absolutely right. I'm afraid of Annie Wilkes. And I've got a couple that are not so well known. First is Orphan, a film from 2009, in which a family takes on a new child from the orphanage. And you can see there's already tension and some unresolved issues within the family unit. And you can't really tell if the orphan is deliberately exacerbating things for her own reasons, or if they're just projecting onto that because they can't deal with their own problems. Another one, The Hole, which had Thora Birch and Keira Knightley, and it's centred around a small group of teenagers who find themselves trapped in an old war bunker, and has one of my favourite things in fiction, which is unreliable narrators, and really plays with that idea. 1990 N. Miller has 2 questions. First of all, who's your favourite small part or one-off character from The League of Gentlemen? They say they've got a big soft spot for Pop, even though he's only in a couple of scenes. He's so memorable and creepy and weird. Well, first of all, while Pop might not be my favourite character, I will definitely agree with you on those points. Emphasis on the creepy. But for me, my favourite small part character, put it this way, have anybody got any balloon stuff? So yeah, Pam Douve. Definitely Pam Douve. I loved her first appearance. I thought that was hysterical. And I love the subsequent appearances she's made as well. Like when she played the Nazi in The Diary of Anne Frank. Probably one of the highlights of Series 3. And her Shakespearean performance in the first live DVD. By the way, I had to study Isabella's pleading scene in my Shakespeare class. And of course, all I could think about was Reece Shearsmith in a floppy hat, shouting in a weird voice. And their second question is, what do you think the special stuff is? That's an interesting one. My initial thoughts when I was watching League of Gentlemen was that the meat might be human. But then that wouldn't really give you a nosebleed, would it? I don't know, I've never tried it. Then I started thinking maybe the source of the special stuff was some creature perhaps not of this world. Maybe some alien species. Or maybe some Lovecraftian entity that Hilary Briss had captured, imprisoned, and started cutting bits off and putting in his sausages. Scrambled 59 asks, since the decade is coming to an end, what do you think is the best movie made in the 2010s? Great question. I would argue it's The Babadook. Seriously, I love that film. I think it's perfect. I wouldn't change a thing about it. It might be predictable coming from me. I know some people wouldn't agree with making it a horror, but honestly the 2010s have been an amazing decade for horror. Some of the names, some of the writers and directors that have come to the forefront now, Jordan Peele, Ari Aster, Mike Flanagan. It's been an incredible time, and I know every time a film of theirs comes up, you will have some critics arguing the case for it by saying it's more than just a horror film, or it's not really a horror film. And I feel that's a bit dismissive. I think horror is dismissed an awful lot as a genre. I don't think that's really fair. I think we're seeing a shift to more acceptance of that. They've also asked, on an unrelated note, which do you prefer, Blur or Oasis? Now, this is going to be the easiest question because it is 100% Blur. Blur were the first band I remember liking. They were the first band that I saw live, and the first album I ever bought was Parklife. As for Oasis, I don't think that much of them at all, and that's putting it mildly. If I had my way, I would ban Wonderwall from all open mic nights and all buskers forever. Alex Wilson asks, as someone who was too young to watch The League of Gentlemen when it started airing, I was pleasantly surprised to see it was still relevant today and being watched by a younger generation. Why do you think the show is still appealing 20 years later and has lasted multiple generations? And that's a great question, and I'll try and answer that as best I can. I think perhaps it's because a lot of the themes and ideas are still relevant, in Britain at least. We still have that small town mentality in a lot of places, and I think young people recognise that quite readily. Maybe it's a universal theme, or maybe Britain just hasn't changed all that much in the past couple of decades. Where I think the real appeal of it comes from and why people can still watch and appreciate it now is because the creators of The League of Gentlemen have more or less just stayed true to themselves and what they wanted to make and what felt right at the time. You'd see other comedy shows and other sketch shows that would maybe try and chase trends or become very catchphrasy to try and appeal to a broader audience. Whereas as soon as The League of Gentlemen got popular, it kind of did the opposite. It got, if anything, even stranger, even weirder, and I think we loved it all the more for that. PC Andy Infinite asks, what kind of horror scares you the most? And I think it's going back to that first idea of psychological horror. It's anything where the horror might be completely in your or the main character's own head. It's the self-doubt and this idea that you can't trust your own mind and your own senses, and that growing sense of paranoia that comes with that. Okay, we've got 4 questions from Sam Ald. First, what kind of microphone do you use for the videos? I can give you the answer right away. It's a 2035 condenser mic from Audio Technica, but truthfully, the setup I have is what you would call overkill. The reason I have this setup is because my partner, Thomas, he's a composer and sound designer and has a home studio set up that frankly it would be mad not to use. So right now it's that mic I use to record, that's then put onto Logic. I then edit the sound in Audacity and the videos are created in Final Cut Pro. For anyone who's wanting to start out, that would be ridiculous. Don't start with all that expensive equipment and software. My older videos, and you can still find some of them on the channel, those were recorded on the Snowball USB mic, which you can usually get for around £50-60. I would record that straight onto Audacity, which is a free piece of software and relatively easy to use. I would then mix the sound again on Audacity, and the windows were made in Movie Maker, which is sadly no longer available. But if anybody listening knows of any good, free or cheap video editing software, please let us know so I can recommend that to other people. Second question, what do you think is the best character in The League of Gentlemen? I think I answered that already, #freetubs. Third question, will you do a Series 5 analysis when it arrives? So that's for Inside Number 9. Yes, that is the plan. I'm not sure how soon after the episodes go out. I'm not sure if those will be in-depth analysis or just short videos on my thoughts on the episodes, or maybe it'll be a series overview when they've all gone out. But yeah, I can't imagine I won't have anything to say about Series 5. And fourth question, if you had to choose between Number 9 and Psychoville, what would you pick? That's a tough one, but I would have to go with Inside Number 9. Don't get me wrong, I love Psychoville, I love what it did, but there's just so much potential in Number 9 and they've explored so many characters and themes and ideas and settings, and I just love it. I hope Number 9 goes on forever and there are no episodes I haven't enjoyed. Okay, another Inside Number 9 question. John Stones asks, if you had to pick just one episode to introduce somebody who'd never seen it to number 9, which one? Now that's really interesting because, of course, I do try and encourage as many people I know as possible to watch Inside Number 9 because it means I can talk about it endlessly to them, to the point they get sick of me. And then I have to make a YouTube video. But for me, it depends on the person. If it's someone I know there'll be an episode that they will like. I do believe there's a number 9 for everyone and everyone's tastes. So if it was just an overview, just one to introduce people to what the show is like, actually the first episode is a good place to start. It's got just that right balance between comedy and awkwardness and a really disturbing underlying tone to it. If it was somebody who appreciated the comedy more, I would maybe suggest A Quiet Night In or La Couchette, both of which have a lot of visual humour, a lot of physical comedy. They're really brilliant at that. If it was a horror fan, I might suggest Deadline, because it's just so unique in what it's doing and genuinely so creepy. I like to watch it with people and see what they make of it and see at what point they twig what's going on. And finally, just all-round recommendations, or people who prefer drama and character pieces, then the ones I would suggest there would be 12 Days of Christine or Bernie Clifton's Dressing Room, which are personally my 2 favourite episodes. Ben Bingley asks, what is your personal favourite movie? Or if you can't choose, then what is your favourite film from each decade since the 70s or 80s? I like the way you put that, so let's go through the decades. We'll start with the 70s. I wasn't alive, but 2 of my favourite films are from there, which would be The Exorcist and Watership Down. There's a double bill you wouldn't forget in a hurry. Favourite film from the 80s is probably Labyrinth. There's an awful lot of good fantasy movies from the 80s, and I love so many of them, but yeah, Labyrinth is probably my favourite. Favourite 90s film? When I think 90s films, I think about going to the video shop at the weekend, and my sister and I always picking the same videos over and over again. And I think our top film from that time was probably Empire Records. Other favourites from the decade, gotta be The Craft. And another one which I definitely shouldn't have been watching in the 90s, but did anyway, was Trainspotting. Favourite film from the 2000s, that was when I got a part-time job in my local Blockbuster, which meant I could rent films for free. Now, the ones I'd always be keen to watch was when the locals came in and they would bring back a film and tell me, oh, that was terrible, that was absolute nonsense, it made no sense, it's utter rubbish. If somebody said that about a film, guaranteed I would want to watch it that night. So one of the films I picked up from there was Donnie Darko. I honestly couldn't tell you if I preferred the theatrical cut or the director's cut. I had both. And back in those days, they had the website that I would try and figure out. I think back when I was still on dial-up. God, that was a long time ago. And for 2010s, as I said, Babadook. But one of my personal favourites that I would have to mention, as it currently holds the record for the most times I've seen a single film in the cinema, was Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I saw it 5 times in total, including one time where I saw it twice on the same day. They've also asked, would I consider doing a video on Silent Hill? Now, I'm not sure if you mean the movie Silent Hill or the game series. I haven't really played the game series. I did see the movie when it came out, and I remember liking it a lot more than most, possibly because I hadn't played the games. So I'm not sure, but thanks for the suggestion. Lovely Ruthie asks, if you could co-write an episode of Inside Number 9 with Pemberton and Shearsmith, what would the number 9 be? Great question, and oh my god, writing with those guys, that would be the dream. But yeah, for settings, what would I choose? I like the ones where they set all of the action inside one flat or one room. I think there's a lot you can do with that. I think you can really show a character's mental state by their surroundings, like they did in Tom and Jerry, or you can show the passage of time in one space, like they did in 12 Days of Christine. Another one I'd like, which I'm surprised they haven't quite done yet, would be a television studio. As I said before, I did work in television. It's a really interesting experience to see the back end of it and to think of the lives of the people who are involved in the things that we see every day. And the last setting I'd think of there, again based on my own experience, would be a library. If it's a public library, anybody from anywhere can just walk in and use the space as they will. How do you get a number 9 from the library? I'm guessing you either make it a numbered break-off or study room. They've done a lot of physical comedy based on people trying to be very quiet before, so I think that could lend itself to a lot of comedy. Or you link it to the Dewey classifications, maybe it happens in that section. Starting with number 9, you would have biography, history and geography. I don't know, might work, might not. But yeah, I doubt Steve and Reese are looking for a co-writer. But if they are, then yeah, I'm available. Please get in touch, leave a comment. Okay, Nathaniel Ecker, or Nathaniel Eker, asks, do you watch Black Mirror? If so, what is your top episode? See, top episode's a bit of a difficult question with Black Mirror, because do I go with the episode I enjoyed the most, or the one that left me the most mentally scarred? I'm guessing it's the latter. But just to say, I haven't seen all of Black Mirror. I recently got back into watching it, but I've only seen the first couple of series and some from series 3. Put it this way, the last episode I saw was Shut Up and Dance, and I think I'm still dealing with that one. I think the other ones that really messed me up would be White Bear from series 2, National Anthem from series 1, and the Christmas special, because it's not just Inside Number 9 that can ruin Christmas. Yeah, that last story really broke me. I'm not sure if anybody wants me to talk about Black Mirror. I'd be happy to. If so, let me know what episodes I should talk about. Morgan Bush asks if you could talk to any Pemberton and Shearsmith character from League, Psycho or Number 9, which would it be? I wasn't sure I could pick just one, so I've picked a character from each. From League of Gentlemen, I'd tell Ross not to sink to Pauline's level. Or, anything else. For Psychoville, I'd tell Mr. Jelly he was right about Exorcist 2. It is shit. I spent 99 pence on a VHS copy of that, and I felt robbed. Finally, from Inside Number 9, I'd tell Len Shelby that Tommy really did care about him, and still does. I'd try and explain that he just did what he had to do, but he really loved performing as a duo. I'd also tell Len that when I was a kid, I would have absolutely loved to have seen a cheese and crackers show. And I think Len would like to know that. Okay, next question. Epsilon YT asks, what's your favourite film of every big genre? Big genre. First of all, comedy. I'm a big Monty Python fan. My favourite of their films would be Life of Brian, I think very closely followed by The Meaning of Life. Action films, I'm going to go with John Wick. Love the John Wick films. Please keep making more of those. It's sci-fi. I'm not sure if I'm going with Alien or Aliens, which are two brilliant films, and I can never quite decide between them. Two very different films as well. I think in the end it's a tie, because anytime I ask this question, I usually end up watching them both. For drama, romance, I would have to say Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is one of my favourite films ever. So much I love about it. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's just incredible. Horror, predictably, The Exorcist. Musicals. May not be regarded as a big genre by everyone, but it's my Q&A. I love musicals. I'm talking musicals. Probably my favourite movie musical, in that I've seen the live show and the film, and I thought the film was a lot better, would probably be Chicago. I just loved the way they managed to stick to one character's perspective. I thought the satire on the media was a lot stronger in the film version, and I just liked the way they would work into each song. Other musicals I love, Repo the Genetic Opera, which I've already started banging on about on this channel, and I see there's some other Repo fans out there. And the last one, which should probably have gone in my favourite 80s films now I think about it, Little Shop of Horrors. And finally, not really a genre, but some people class it as such, animated films. As I said, Watership Down, one of my favourite films. Even Pop couldn't ruin it for me. I'd also say any of the animated films that Don Bluth made in the 1980s and Grave of the Fireflies. What can I say? I like animated films that make me cry. So you had 2 questions. What's your favourite film of every big genre and TV show? Okay, I'm going to be really cheeky here and say Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Okay, we got comedy, action, sci-fi, drama, romance, horror. There's a musical episode. There's Once More with Feeling. No animated series though, although there very nearly was. But in the end it didn't happen, so I'm going to have to pick something else. And that's probably going to have to be BoJack Horseman, which has broken me on several occasions and I know is going to do it all over again with the next part of Series 6. Midnight Glow asks, what do you think makes British horror and general weirdness different to more American Hollywoodized horror? I feel like us lot on this creepy grey island have a different culture when it comes to black comedy and twisted psychological horror, so I'm super glad more people are taking notice of stuff like League, 9 and Psychoville now. Like Black Mirror, for example, started as a moody, dire take on modern UK culture, but the recent Netflix seasons are more tame? Okay, brilliant question. I think what makes us different, and I remember seeing a good video essay on this, is that over here we're a lot more self-deprecating, we're a lot more deadpan, and that lends itself to a different kind of humour. It's one that doesn't always work in American translations. Maybe they're just too confident or glamorous compared to us little British weirdos. I think there's a subtlety to it as well that works in horror. I think there's more of a low budget, more of a dark, dingy and depressing feel that maybe can't be captured elsewhere. I think in Britain we're also a bit more comfortable with downer endings. I think we embrace pessimism a little better than our American counterparts. I can't even say if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But yet there is a difference and you can see it in different media. Finster/M Pegasus asks, you've done horror, you've done games, ever thought about doing horror games? Well, first of all, thanks for noticing that I did do games, but I'm afraid the short answer to that is probably not. And the reason for that is when it comes to horror games, I am a massive wuss. So don't expect any playthroughs of PT or Alien Isolation anytime soon, because I don't think I could handle it. I think to this day the scariest game I've actually played through to completion was probably the first BioShock, and that's not even really classed as a horror game. I just found it scary. I found it disturbing, had a lot of jumpy moments with the splicers. Sadly, I didn't play too much of the great survival horror games of the PS1 era, because back then I couldn't afford many games and I had to go with what Blockbuster had. So I played Resident Evil 3 and not any of the others at the time, and completely missed out on Silent Hill. Okay, last set of questions are from Martin Brooks. First, do you think that the number 9 series would have worked if written by Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith, but their characters were played by other actors? And I think, yes, it would have worked. I think the scripts are strong enough that they could have been played by anyone. They'd still be brilliant. Also, I know they don't write the scripts with their casting in mind. They don't imagine themselves as specific characters most of the time when they're writing it. They normally figure that out later. And in some of the great episodes, they're only playing very small parts. But there are some where I think they are better for having them play the characters that they do. Because they're not just great writers, they're also phenomenal actors. Of course, the episode that comes to mind first is Bernie Clifton's dressing room, which I think had to be them. I think they wrote that for their own capabilities, and the results are just brilliant. It's one of my favourites. Second question, how does the series compare to such all-time classics as Twilight Zone and Outer Limits? I'll be honest, I haven't seen much of either of those shows. By now they've had so many episodes and so many different incarnations that I honestly wouldn't know the best place to start. I think these are things that I should be watching though, so if anybody can recommend where to start with either Twilight Zone or Outer Limits, please let me know in the comments. The third question's, what is the appeal of League of Gentlemen? Seriously, I just don't get it. Okay, pitchforks down, everyone. It's okay if someone doesn't like the League of Gentlemen. As a huge fan of League of Gentlemen, I can completely understand why somebody wouldn't like it. It is weird, it's creepy, but asking what is the appeal, I think it's because it's both comedy and horror. Those two genres really work on the element of surprise. And when you combine those two, you really have no idea where a sketch is going to go or what a character is going to do next. And it could be anything. And I think that kind of tension and then breaking the tension with something just bizarre or silly was personally what made it work for me. Also, the fact there was just nothing like that at the time, but that's not for everyone. So yeah, also, I have honestly no idea if the League of Gentlemen appeals to anybody outside of the British Isles. I'd be interested to hear people's feedback on that, because I'm not sure how well that translates, if at all, or if the fact it makes the show even weirder is a bonus point. Please, I'm very curious. Let me know. And final question. What do you think about an episode where an online TV critic is stalked by an overzealous fan who disagrees with her top 9 lists? Don't worry about posting an answer to that last one. I can see what you're typing from here. What was that? Is someone there? Oh my gosh!